If you're after an old school hack and slash action RPG, then you could go far worse than checking out Ys Memoire, The Oath in Felghana. Now this is where things get a bit confusing. If you played the original Ys 3, Wanderer from Ys, this is a reimagining of that one that's then been brought across to the Nintendo Switch with a slight lick of paint and a number of different tweaks and improvements that fans of the game are going to enjoy, not least of which a full voiceover cast and some other bits and bobs that we'll go into. Now weirdly, I was playing on a retro handheld the other day and I was actually playing Ys 3 just over the Christmas period and thoroughly enjoying it, not realising that I'd be reviewing this one, and as soon as I booted it up was like, hang on, this is basically the same game. But if you love this on PSP, then I think you're in for a bit of a treat. A thanks to the publisher for the review copy. Is it an enjoyable trip down memory lane? Oh, that's terrible. Well, my name is Mark Walker, welcome back to SwitchUp, now let's find out. The story then sees series favourites Adol and his friend DOGI returning to DOGI's homeland, Felghana. The place is absolutely teeming with wildlife in the form of various monsters, and throughout the course of its 10 to 15-hour-long adventure, they're uncovering exactly what's going on, unmasking corrupt nobility, fighting against magic-wielding beasts, all the good stuff you like in your action RPGs. Nothing overly surprising, but the addition of voice acting does make a big difference to the overall feeling. They've really gone above and beyond with the amount of side characters who are voiced. While it's not 100% of the cast, it certainly is most people, sure with varying degrees of success, but generally quite strong.
This place sure hasn't changed much either.
Gameplay features a few different things. We'll talk about the changes first that are accessible in the menu. You can fiddle around with the controls, choosing an 8-way directional option, or stick with the full 360-degree movement. You can change the way that magic and dash mechanics work, and it's from the main menu that you'll find a museum feature, which includes a novella prologue to allow you to get into the story without perhaps playing any of the other games. There's a gallery for looking at artworks and illustrations, and there's a movie section for playing back cutscenes. This one features 5 different difficulty modes ranging from very easy for newcomers all the way up to nightmare for seasoned players who are returning for a bit of a challenge. The normal difficulty mode is reasonable if a little easy until you reach some of those boss fights. It's a very action heavy RPG that moves incredibly smoothly. You're hacking away at enemies with one button, the other controls your magic, and you can also do a jump in smash, with the combat relying on a combo system whereby consecutive attacks build up your power, enhancing your strength, MP and experience gain, with it fading if not maintained, which adds at least a little depth to it. Having played so many RPGs in recent times, there is something refreshing about simply spamming your way through hordes of enemies, but certain ones will be vulnerable to magic only, so that doesn't always work, and you can hold the button down to perform a different move. You've also got basically a frenzied state, which every now and then you can activate by pressing X, increasing Adol's damage output and movement speed, and making you even more of a tank. I thought I'd get bored of this combat system quite quickly, but there's something to be said about feeling like a powerful protagonist for a change, and you can improve and temper your weapons and armour to enhance their effectiveness, but through combat you'll level up, gaining an increase to your abilities, but there's no intricate systems for skill trees. It's all about that frenzied hack and slash. Outside of combat you will be doing a lot of backtracking, running around environments, and sometimes some minor platforming, using your jump or later double jump, but if things aren't quite fast enough for you, there is a turbo mode that can be activated by clicking the right stick in. This takes things up to a healthy 1.5 times speed, with a further click taking you up to a comical 200%. There's also fast travel, using what's called the wing talisman, so that you can walk to different locations and save time there. Generally it's just a fast-paced experience, which isn't something you usually say even for normal action RPGs. This is all facilitated by performance, as we'll see in the next section, which is really nice to say. There is your usual array of main and side quest activities, collectathons, but this is not a massive game. I do think when they originally did this reimagining, they should have worked more on the map. I seem to be complaining a lot about maps recently, but here you have to go into the options, go into your inventory and then access the map, which has, well, not a great deal of information really, but thankfully with the speed ups on, you really can get around at a fair clip. Aside from slicing through enemies, you'll be fighting various bosses. This for me is where combat didn't hold up to modern standards in any way really. Some of them are fine, but there's one in particular early on that shows the age of the game. You've got this enemy firing these projectiles over and over again. Hit them with your magic, jump over, hit them with your magic. The magic will run down, you'll kind of jump about a bit waiting for it to restore, and you'll just rinse and repeat this same thing for what seems like an eternity. Now I always know when the design isn't quite right because I find myself completely losing focus, and you end up dying in stupid ways, not because the boss was difficult, but just because you got bored. There are some great ones, don't get me wrong, but the bad ones, well, they stand out. Having started with these three, it's actually been really useful because coming here you can see so many improvements. It's so slick and smooth to play, and it's just no nonsense. You're not juggling a huge inventory, you're not fussing with any skill trees, you're just having a jolly good adventure with Adol and his pal DOGI. Gameplay overall, I think it deserves 16 out of 20. The controls also score 16 out of 20. Visually, we have a drastically improved frame rate, which runs at 60 FPS all the time, next to no load times, which was nice to see. When you enter houses, it's like instantaneous. The resolution's been upscaled to native, but you'll get noticeable tessellation on cliffs and brickwork, which I think does detract from some more nicer polished elements. Things like the character images have actually seen a change. You've got the originals and these enhanced versions where they've been redrawn to more fittingly suit the original idea, I guess. The shadow engine is rubbish. Much of the flatness of the overall game is because the shadows just aren't good. You got the little circle beneath the character, but where's the dynamic shadows? The improved lighting? Yes, I know what you're saying. The PSP couldn't do any of that. Well, yeah, you're probably right. But perhaps they've gone far in some areas. Just a little bit more, it would have looked a lot nicer. Now, outside of the 60 FPS gameplay and combat, there are some lovely anime-style cutscenes. These seem to run between 24 and 30 FPS. I can't be sure, it's obviously intentional, but they look fantastic. I did experience one bug, and I couldn't actually recreate it, where the sound effects would stop working. So I'd be swinging my silent sword around, and the fix was simply to save the game. You don't even need to exit out and come back in. It never happened again, so yeah, it might be just me. On the subject of sound, it has its original soundtrack, but it's also got a couple of extra options. You can switch between those original iterations, and for me that was a godsend. I'm not a huge fan of the action rock music that's the default personally. I'd really enjoyed the X68000 version, and the remaster of all the tracks makes it sound so much better. Final note on voice then. Well, Adol does have a few lines of dialogue, but he's still pretty quiet across the board. This guy's not chewing your ear off. And so visuals and performance, they can't score too high because it doesn't look great, but it does run amazingly. They score 16 out of 20. Sound and audio scores 18 out of 20. Ys Memoire, The Oath in Felghana, will set you back $24.99. It has a physical available as well, which is a little more expensive at $34.99 or your regional equivalent, and the whole thing's going to take you about 10 to 15 hours as mentioned. It's not a bad price. We see a lot of remakes and remasters with far less attention given to them at much higher prices, so if you're a fan of the original, certainly consider grabbing this one, and if you're not, it'll be a nice little sales pickup. The extra things like the museum and the work that's clearly gone into it do give it a bit more value. I'd give it 17 out of 20. Ys Memoire, The Oath in Felghana, has been a pleasant surprise. Sometimes less is more in all games, and this does all the RPG things you enjoy at 60 FPS, and while it's no oil painting, it's a fun, if sometimes a little dated experience. It gets a SwitchUp score of 83%. Alright, nice one. That's review number 2 of the year. Let me know if you'll be considering this one, if you're picking it up, if you played it originally, did you play Ys 3, or did you pick this one up on PSP? Thank you to our Patreons, our members, all of you that enjoy the content, and as always, for all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers guys, see ya!
This is my